We should be live.
Fabulous. Well, our audio stuff continues to mess with us a little bit, but that's part of the fun. That's what we're doing. We're learning here, and hopefully you guys are learning along with us. This is Hosted Bar. I'm Erin Ogden, and as always, we've got our co-host and IT support, Jeff Glazer, going on with his rocking his headphones today. This is the episode where we're going to talk with each other about what we learned from last time with Tim and Dan from LBW and talking about money and business partners and what exactly is value of wealth. But first, Mr. Glazer, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a 2017 New Glarus Enigma. It is a Flanders sour aged with cherries. Oak aged with cherries.
That sounds good.
It's pretty delicious.
One
of my favorite beers that they make.
I am going with a red wine. Already got some lipstick on it. This is Akiyoshi. It's a cab from California, Clarksburg, California, to be exact.
Clarksburg, huh?
Yeah, I think we were through there. It's near Napa. So one of the things that came up a lot with Tim and Dan was how important it was to actually talk about all of the awkwardness that comes with being a business partner and what you should do with money. And so what I got a lot about their discussion was being transparent, but also being honest and not saying what you think people want to hear, but more about what you actually expect. And I think it's always fun to hear financial planners and business guys talk about like being open and honest and knowing your feelings. But I thought it was really important that they were bringing it up, especially because they themselves are business owners, so they know of which they speak.
Yeah, I mean, this has been particularly relevant for me over the last couple of days because I've been spending a lot of time talking to people about operating agreements. So yesterday I had a meeting for 2.5 hours with a group who is trying to figure out how they're going to work together. And one of the big themes of that meeting is something that Dan, or I think Tim, brought up that you guys talk about all the time, and that Tim says he uses from you, which is talk about these things now while everybody agrees, because when everybody doesn't agree, you don't want to have to be making decisions when people aren't agreeing with each other.
Right, and not even if it is when you agree, it's when you're getting along,
yeah.
Right? When you're all, because you want to make sure everyone's rowing in the same direction. And if someone's not wanting to go in that direction, you want to know sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what I thought was interesting about this meeting was like some of the people were, they would constantly sort of apologize for bringing issues up. It was like, oh, I don't mean to be a pain in the ass, or I don't mean to be the asshole here, or, I know I'm asking hard questions and I don't mean to be the dick. And it was like, dude, that's what this meeting's for. This meeting is for hypotheticals. This meeting is for thinking about worst case scenarios, because I can give you a whole lot of things that are going to sound really bad, but are absolutely true in ways in which your business is going to fall apart. And so think about that stuff today, because you do not want to be thinking about it as it's falling apart.
Right. You're not the asshole for bringing it up now. It's preventing you from being, or other people being, one later. Because you talk about it, and you come up with those eventualities now. I always joke that one of the things that nobody wants to bring up, so I always do, is, okay, what happens if you die? Does it go to your spouse?
Right.
And everybody, their first thought, well, not everybody, you'd always see it play across their face, where everybody's like, would my spouse do it? yeah. And then they look around the room and there's always the one person who they always tend to look at the same person and be like, not that spouse.
Yeah, I don't
And
think.
it's funny, right? They're like, yeah. Nope. And it's, I would say a good percentage of the time, the person that said that they're all noping is like, not my spouse. Like, even they know
Right.
it's them. And sometimes they don't, and that's where it gets really awkward. But it's like, it's a funny dynamic to watch people be like, oh, yeah. Ooh. Or, and if they don't have that, then you say, okay, what about kids? Spouse, okay, what about kids? And then they're like, and then that's when everybody starts going, maybe. And so you want to talk about it now, not after, after you die, you can't talk about it.
Yeah. No, I know. It's always thinking about that stuff that, um, do you want to be in business with your business partner's wife? And the answer is almost always no. I do not want to be in business with my business partner's wife, or husband or
So you
spouse
know
or
what?
whatever it might
I
be.
would, I'd be careful with that
Yeah, I know.
gender roles
I
there,
know.
buddy.
I think about that all the time. Think about that because I'm sure Colin's like, yeah, me neither. Um,
Because I'm pretty sure that lots of people would love to be business partners with your wife.
I'm absolutely sure of it. My wife is a wonderful
Well,
business
because
partner.
well, no, but more, we work with a lot of women business owners who might have wives, might have husbands, and we work with quite a few business owners who don't have wives. They have, even their male, they have husbands. So I always make sure I say spouse rather than wife or
Yeah,
husband.
no, I get it. So,
Um, yeah, I just like that they were so upfront about that, and also about not just where you are right now, but where you want to be. I mean, that's financial planner world, right? They always say plan for your future.
yep.
Um, but it's so important when you're talking about businesses, when you're going into business, even though you might be small now, what do you do when you're not small? What do you do when you're not talking about losses, but you're talking about profits? Those, speaking of not small businesses, one thing that you've been kind of obsessing over lately is this idea of how do you actually, like, the wealthiest two men in America are Bezos and
Elon Musk,
Musk,
yeah.
but right, but their bank accounts, well, I'm sure are healthy,
Yeah.
and I'm sure would make ours look pretty paltry, do not reflect the headlines that have been in the news.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we got into last time with Tim and Dan a little bit, right? Which is, the idea that just because you're worth $120 billion doesn't mean you have $120 billion worth of cash, right? And granted, I'm sure Bezos's bank account is much larger than mine, um, but it doesn't have $120 billion worth of cash in it. And the reality is that if he tried to convert that to $120 billion worth of cash, he probably can't. If he were to sell 100% of his holdings and convert it 100% to cash, it would probably not come out to $120 billion, right? And that's because that represents the company's value, but he's a significant part of that company. And so if he were to leave that company, if he were to sell out his interest in that company, all of a sudden the company wouldn't be worth as much. And so the more he sells, the less the company becomes worth because people think that that company has some attachment to him and the cult of personality that is Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. Or this was an issue when Bill Gates left Microsoft as well, that how is that transition going to happen? And when Bill left, I say Bill, like he's like my best friend or something, my
Your
friend
buddy.
Bill Gates, but when he left, obviously he didn't sell out 100% of his interest in Microsoft. right? He probably couldn't. There's not enough people who could buy it at the price that he would be willing to pay for, or the price that he would take for it, right? It would tank the stock price if he were to try to sell out his entire interest. Not to mention securities laws that prevent him from selling 100% of his interest all at once. But so this idea that this person's worth $120 billion doesn't necessarily, or certainly doesn't equate to cash value. And so, what does it mean to be worth $120 billion, right? And, I'll be honest, I don't know what my net worth is. It's not $120 billion. But, I'm a person that has a fairly significant amount of student debt, for example. So, is my net worth inclusive of my student debt or not inclusive of my student debt, right? And does it really represent the spending or buying power that I have or represent? And I'm sure Dan and Tim know the answer to that question.
They probably know it better than we do. So when I hear about this, it makes me think about a question that I was actually asked when I was a guest on a podcast. The State Bank Across Plains does a podcast about wealth and all of that. And they asked me, what does it mean to be wealthy? And I think this is something that goes back to the conversation about talking to your business partners about what does it mean to be wealthy? What does it mean to be successful? Right? Because it doesn't mean that you have to be worth 120 billion when you aren't maybe worth 120 billion, but is the headline level of money important? Is high dollar important? One thing that our firm talks about a lot is I'd sacrifice money for time, right? I want to be able, I don't want to work 7 days a week. So if that means that we aren't millionaires, but I can enjoy something, then let's do it. But if you have a partner that is trying to drive, the balance sheet as high as possible, and another one saying, I want time. I have, my measure of success and wealth is that I can enjoy life rather than I can enjoy my bank account. That's really important to know. And also, it can change, right? Like if you are in your 20s, that might be a different answer than when you're in your 30s and when you're in your 40s, or go on. So I think it's important to check in with your other owners and make sure that that's what they had said at the beginning still matters, right? Because when we first started, Colin didn't have a kid. Now he does. And so that might change his priorities. It might not, but it's not my job to assume that. And it's not his job to always have to bring it up, I don't think. I think part of being a leader is asking and giving the opportunity to have that discussion.
Yeah, no, I think that's right? That, all of this is just sort of being open and honest and transparent with your business partners, so that you can plan for the future, right? That people are going to have more or less time, and if you can, as much of a heads up as you can get about that can help you plan and resource and capacity planning, right? To be able to judge how much work you're going to be able to do, or what the quality of work that you're going to be able to do, or whether you need to staff, or making strong business decisions. And this is up and down the entire chain, and it's not just ownership, it's employees as well, right? That you need to understand what your employees are trying to get out of it as well, so that you're not all of a sudden left with an employee that doesn't want to work for you anymore, and then you're left holding a bag when the employee leaves because they don't like you. But whole variety of reasons why just being open and transparent can help you make better business decisions, and isn't about trying to keep information from somebody, right? Because you're afraid they're going to leverage that against you, right? If I know that Erin's going to be taking a break or doing less work, then maybe I just hold off on making decisions until I know Erin's not looking, and then I can get the answers that I want, right? That's not really the best way to be running a business.
Well, and I think your point is also making sure people understand when they're coming in, so they can say, "Oh, this looks good for me," because we were just having this conversation with a friend of ours who's looking for a job, and I was saying how it's so important to understand the compensation structure when going in, because they could tell you all of the fancy, pretty words and build castles in the sky about this is how they're going to act. But if the compensation structure doesn't match, doesn't incentivize that, then all of those words are, fairy dust.
Right.
Because you have to make sure the compensation structure matches the mission. Right? You can't say we are team-based and then all of the money is based on what you bring in and what you do yourself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it goes to the very profit model, at least in a business like ours, which is service-based.
Well, even not for service-based, if you're doing product thing and this goes to if you're selling stuff, and you're saying that this is a team-based thing, but your compensation is based on how much you sell, you're never going to hand off a sale to somebody else. Or if you're, the whole Best Buy, kind of thing, if I get a commission, I'm going to push harder on that sale especially on a higher end product.
Right. And I'm going to get in your face the second you walk in the door. So that I can make sure that I'm the one that gets that sale.
Right? As opposed to listening to what they actually want and serving that person. If you're going to say, "Oh, yes, we want to listen and serve the client and get them what they need and take the time they want and all that," and then you're like, "Nope, commission-based, and you have to hit certain targets." I mean, this is what REI, was it not last year, 2019, had a whole thing about, they're saying that this is what they want, but all of the compensation models are showing the opposite. And I mean, good for them, good for their employees. They called them out on it, and REI was like, "You're right, we're off kilter." But I think that conversation about money, your point is well taken. It's not just amongst the owners.
Yeah, needs to be inclusive of everybody.
And so I guess one thing that's hard is how do you do that at all levels, especially as a bigger company, right? As a small company, amongst our owners, three of us having a conversation about money, cracking open a beer and have at it. Add three more people, okay, maybe a beer and a bottle of wine, and we can have a good discussion. But if you start adding layers of people, I think, is it harder, or is it harder because you make it harder? Because I know you and I both talked about this, that we're all about transparency. You want to find out how much I make? Here it is. And I don't think we would change that. Oh, well, Lewis has thoughts about that, or Kat. I tried to block the door so he couldn't come in. He's been pushing on it for the past 20 minutes so he could come in and share that insightful thought. But I think if we were 20 attorneys, 50 attorneys, I'd still want to say this is what my salary is. This is how I make my money. But I've certainly been in organizations where that wasn't.
No, I mean, I've been in organizations where you're specifically told do not discuss salary with your coworkers. And I have routinely ignored that because I think it's ridiculous, right? I mean, if somebody wants to know how much I make, happy to tell them. If they make more than me, great. If they make less than me, sorry about your luck, buddy. And you know, I got in trouble. It was back when I was in. I used to work when I worked at Chili's, and I told one of my coworkers what I was making per hour, and this person wasn't making anywhere near that, but he had come into the company at the same time I did, and so he went to the manager and bitched about how much money he was, about how I was getting paid so much more than him. And the manager came and yelled at me for telling him how much I made, and I was like, look, that's not my problem. Pay him more. If you, if you don't want to get yelled at how much you're paying him, pay him more. Like, that's not on me. That's on you, dude.
Because I think that's a really actually important thing, and I want to call you out on saying that's, you know, tough luck, buddy, because that's that whole thing about being transparent about open payment and things like that is a big contribution to the pay gap for women and people of color. Like, I guarantee you often been on the higher end because you're the white guy. And so the fact that you're sharing that thing so other people can be like, oh my gosh, I'm getting like hosed here, is important. It's not sorry about your luck. And I know that's not how you
No, I told the manager sorry about your luck, not him. I mean, that guy was like, I mean, at the time I was making $7.25 and he was making $6.95. So, you know, I mean, take it for what it's worth. Right. But, you know, my discussion was with the manager, not necessarily with the other employee. Like, you know, sorry you're not making as much as I am. I'm sure there are maybe reasons for that, or maybe there's not. But take it up with management, and if management has problems, be able to justify what you're paying somebody. If any of my employees came to me and said, "Why is that person getting paid more than me?" I have good reasons for paying that person more. I can say, this is exactly why this person gets paid what they get paid, and this is exactly why you're getting paid what you get paid. And, I mean, to your point, everybody in the organization knows what everybody else in the organization is making. If they want to know how much somebody else is making, happy to tell them. They can look. I mean, right. All of the files are where everybody can see them anyway.
It was funny, my payroll person was like, do you want her to know all of this stuff? I'm like, oh, she
everybody already knows it anyway.
Because I was having our assistant help her. Right. But that transparency is really important for pay equality. And I think, again, this goes back to being transparent and being authentic about why is this salary the way it is? Why is this pay structure the way it is? Because if it's off, you should be able to explain why. And if your answer is not something you want to say, then it's probably not a good reason for it to be that way.
Yeah, if you think you're getting away with something, it's probably not the right salary. You know, I don't know. This is one of those areas that over the years I've always had a lot of issues with employers that I've had that have been particularly secretive about salaries and bonus structures. I mean, this is particularly bad in our industry, where, you know, partner level lawyers don't want to share salary and income information with particularly associates, let alone junior partners. You know, because they're afraid, you know, for some reason they're afraid that the employees are going to know how much they're taking home. And I never understood why people were afraid of that. Why do you care? It's your business. Like, take home what you want to take home.
Well, and if you're afraid of that, it's because you think that they're going to be treated unfairly. And if you're afraid think that they're being treated unfairly, it's probably because
they're being treated unfairly. That's right.
Right? I am never scared about anyone finding out in my organization what I'm paying, because they'll be like, oh, it'll prove that, it'll disprove any unfairness, right? It'll show, and if they have questions, I'm happy to explain why. And so I guess my theory is, if you're trying to hide it, Why are you trying
Yeah.
to hide
And to
it?
be fair, I mean, executive compensation at your firm isn't 100 to 1 from executives to to the average employee.
Right, but but that's like that happens a lot, and especially retail and things like that. I think that you should be able to explain it. And this is the Costco approach, right? Where he kind of caps the CEO caps that I'm not going to be above this. Of course, the CEO is
Yeah,
going to
of
be paid
course.
more than the checkout person, of course. But also, shouldn't they understand why you're being paid, and not just salary,
Right. Total
right? I think it's
compensation.
important to because right to go back to this whole what is the value, what is the worth, because it's not just what's on your check when you're at a business owner or you're at executive level, because you're getting a whole lot more than just a check. This is like the NFL players that what they're getting paid to play football is nothing compared to their sponsorship. It wasn't that Gronk. He saved all of his NFL. He never spent a dime on his
He
NFL
just lived off
salary. He only
sponsorships.
spent his which he lives large, right? Like nobody's thinking that Gronk is, in a one room studio apartment. But he's like, I know that I can live off that and I can save. So he always knew he had that money saved aside. But for his professional players that don't get the sponsorship, but they're living like they did.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll be honest, like I don't think it's professional football where the pay disparity is the biggest problems, right? It's not professional football. It's fast food, it's manufacturing, it's uh, all kinds of places where you have Amazon, right? Where you have huge pay disparity between executives and the people who are working on the floor, and meanwhile the company is maybe not I don't know what Amazon's profitability is off the top of my head, but when the company is doing stock buybacks for is doing multi-billion-dollar stock buybacks, and they have employees who are barely making minimum wage, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, right? Because that tells me your company that there's money there that you could be paying employees better.
Right. So the NFL thing is less about disparity and more about uh, what because I've actually talked to quite a few NFL players and things about this, about how it's the same thing that a lot of people follow this trip, keeping up with the
Mm-hmm.
Joneses. Right. I'm in the NFL, so I should have the big bling, the big cars, the big everything. But they don't have the um they don't have the Gronk level of um, sponsorships, or and not being truthful, not being honest, and not being authentic, saying this is the lifestyle I'm in. Right, my lifestyle is that I get the modest thing because I'm getting paid 300,000, which is good, but I'm getting paid 300,000 for 4 years, and then I'm out. So I better figure out how to have that. And there's, I guess, a lot of that thing is that the players amongst themselves don't. And from what I understand, this is changing a little bit. But for a long time, the players amongst themselves weren't saying, "Oh yeah, no, I'm not going to do that because I financial reasons." But it was always egging it on. Be like, "What? Get the diamond grill."
Yeah.
So it just goes back down to being honest with others and yourself about what it is that's actually going on and what is value, what is worth, what
Yeah,
is
I think if
wealth.
we had, I think if we had more transparency in salary, I think we would have more parity in salary as well. I think a lot of those,
And that was the
uh,
Ledbetter
I think a
law,
lot of the
right?
discrepancy just comes from the fact that we keep all this information hidden so that we can take advantage of people, and um, it's pretty well documented that people are pretty shitty negotiators for themselves. Back when I was a software developer, I had a really good headhunter, that was just sort of my guy that got me jobs every 2 years. And he did all of the negotiation for me. And as a result, I had great deals everywhere I went. I got great cash. I got great benefits. I got great stock incentives, all kinds of things. Like it was awesome. But I will tell you, like since I didn't have that guy negotiating on my behalf, I have way worse salary. I mean, comparatively, I have way worse
But
salaries.
we pay
No, I
you
know.
fine.
I'm obviously, today isn't as
Right.
big of a deal, but I can point to a number of occasions throughout my career where I have been chronically underpaid. I've been drastically underpaid just because I'm a terrible negotiator for myself. I'm a fine negotiator for my clients, but I'm a terrible negotiator for myself. And so, you know what? I got paid garbage when I first started being a lawyer. And you know what? It was because my law firm was taking advantage of me. And you know what? Fuck those guys. They're a bunch of assholes. And girls. There are women there. They suck too. And it was exactly this kind of thing where they're just trying to get one over on you so that they can have a higher distribution at the end of the year. And you know what? I resent that. I work in the organization and I have a right to make a living. And if you can't pay me enough that I can even make payments on the education that got me to where I'm working, well, you know what? Fuck off. You know what? I deserve more than that. And I'm a terrible negotiator for
So
myself.
this is a perfect segue. We're at the end of our time, and next time our next guest is Ashley Quinto Powell, and she's going to be talking a bit about work-life balance and how to do it. But her main, like what she does, what her business is talking to women about how to negotiate salaries.
Can she talk to
Like
men about how to negotiate salaries too? Because I'm garbage at it.
I'm sure she would take on men clients, right? I'm sure she would take on a man client, but that's her gig, because most people are horrible advocates for themselves. Most people are awful at negotiating for themselves. Women tend to be worse. And so one of the things that we'll be talking about is how do you work-life balance, and part of that is being an advocate for yourself. Part of that is saying, this is important to me. I have to do that. And some of that time is to work and say, this is important to me. I have to go to, ball game. And part of that is to your family saying, I'm mommy, but that doesn't mean that you don't know how to work a washing machine.
Yep.
So perfect segue. Great job, Jeff. You didn't even know.
Awesome. Fun as always. I think we're done.
So that's all. We're done, and we'll see you guys next time with Ashley.